You're not fooled by life. You're fooled by the way you see it. You can stare directly at truth and still miss it, like trying to find your glasses while they're already on your face, or searching for your phone while holding it in your hand. The problem was never your eyes, it was your attention, your mind deciding what's worth seeing and what's not. Most of us walk through life believing we see reality clearly. But what if I told you, you don't see the world as it is? You see the world your mind allows you to see? Neuroscientist Anil Seth explained it best. We're all hallucinating all the time. When we agree on the hallucination, we call it reality. Think about optical illusions. Same picture, different interpretations. Or the famous dress that broke the internet. Half the world swore it was blue and black. The other half gold and white. Same light, same pixels. Completely different worlds in our minds. Because your brain doesn't passively record reality like a camera. It constructs reality like an artist, using memories, beliefs, past pain, preferences, expectations, assumptions. You're not looking at life, you're editing it. Two people can live the same moment and walk away with opposite truths. One sees rejection, the other sees freedom. One sees failure, the other sees a new beginning. Not because life was different, but because their internal lens was. This idea isn't new. Plato warned that humans live in the shadows of their own minds. In Jewish mysticism, reality is seen as layers of perception rather than a single objective truth. And Zen Buddhism cuts straight to the core. We do not suffer because of the world, but because of the world we think we see. Here's the twist. Your mind isn't broken, and it's not your enemy. It's doing its job, trying to protect you. But sometimes the very system meant to keep you safe becomes the invisible cage that limits you. We don't argue with reality. We argue with our interpretation of it. We don't fear the moment. We fear the story we attach to it. We don't suffer events. We suffer meanings. Imagine looking at a river. The river flows freely, silently, without asking anything of you. But your mind might say, it's too fast, it's too deep. What if I fall? What if I drown? The river never changed. The story did. Freedom begins at a subtle shift. Not asking, why is this happening to me? But whispering, what story am I telling myself about this? And sometimes the deepest awakening isn't seeing the truth. It's realizing how often you've been creating your own illusion. Now let's move into the first part of today's video, the root of illusions when the mind clouds reality. This is where we begin to understand why we often fail to see things as they truly are, and why moments of suffering, misunderstanding, or frustration creep into our lives. According to Buddhism, the deepest reason we fail to perceive reality is avidya, or ignorance, not realizing that our own mind is clouded. We believe we see clearly, yet our minds are busy filling the world with assumptions, memories, and stories we ourselves create. From this ignorance, the mind generates four fundamental distortions of perception, known in Pali as vipallasa. First, we perceive impermanence as permanence. We cling to relationships, successes, even our own health, as if they will never change. When change inevitably occurs, pain hits hard because we haven't learned to see life as it is, constantly flowing, constantly shifting. Second, we turn suffering into pleasure, constantly seeking joy from temporary things, thinking they will bring lasting happiness. Yet such joy is fleeting, and when it passes, it leaves a sense of emptiness and disappointment. The third, and perhaps the most subtle, is mistaking non-self for the I. Our minds endlessly attach me and mine to every experience, every thought, every feeling. We identify with this imagined self, and it colors every perception. This is why we feel hurt, judged, or deprived, not because the world changes, but because our internal lens amplifies it. Fourth, we perceive the impure as beautiful or desirable. The mind has a remarkable ability to embellish reality, to judge and reshape it, making us fall in love with illusions. A simple example, mistaking a rope for a snake in the dark. The fear is real, but the object is not. Our mind layered meaning onto reality. Perception, or sanya, continues this process by labeling everything and adding subjective significance. turning each object, each moment, into part of our self-centered narrative. Day after day, we stop seeing things as they truly are, and instead see them only in relation to our ego, with its attachments, fears, and desires. The concept of the I, mana, is the greatest illusion, a subtle shadow infiltrating every experience. It compels us to protect, possess, justify, and control, even though all phenomena are impermanent and non-self. Each time we mistake the suffering of the ego for reality, we trap ourselves in cycles of pain, unaware that it is the mind's own story causing the anguish. Imagine a simple moment, walking down the street and watching a leaf fall. A casual mind might observe it and move on. But the ego layers on a story. This leaf is beautiful, yet its falling means the season is slipping away. The leaf hasn't changed. The story has. So in this first section, we begin to see the roots of distorted perception. From ignorance to the four vipallasa, from sanya to mana. Understanding this is not about guilt or despair. It's the first step toward removing the colored lenses of the ego and starting to see the world as it truly is. As we begin to see how deeply our minds shape reality, we now move into the next part of today's video. When science meets Buddhism, the brain as a reality constructor. Building on what we just explored, the illusions created by ignorance, labels, and the ego, we enter a fascinating intersection where modern neuroscience and ancient Buddhist wisdom converge. Both disciplines, though separated by centuries and culture, point to the same profound insight. What we experience as reality is not a direct reflection of the world, but a construction of the mind. Neuroscientists today describe the brain as a predictive processing machine. Rather than passively receiving data from the senses, the brain actively predicts what it expects to perceive, constantly updating its expectations with incoming sensory information. This means that much of what we see or hear is shaped by our memories, beliefs, and prior experiences. A dynamic model of reality that is remarkably efficient, but not always accurate. Your brain does not give you the world as it is. It gives you a version that it predicts based on your past. In Buddhism, this aligns closely with the concept of sankhara, often translated as mental formations or conditioning. Just as the brain builds a model of reality based on past patterns, sankhara describes the habits, intentions, and conditioned responses that shape how we perceive the world. Each thought, each emotion, each habitual reaction layers on top of experience, subtly warping reality and reinforcing our attachment to a personal narrative. Western philosophy echoes similar insights. Immanuel Kant argued that humans only have access to phenomena, the world as it appears to us through our perceptions. We can never directly know the thing in itself, the raw reality behind our senses. In other words, reality is always filtered through mental structures that shape space, time, and causality. David Hume went even further. When searching for the self, Hume found nothing solid, only a continuous flow of perceptions. The sense of a permanent, unchanging I was an illusion. This is strikingly similar to the Buddhist teaching of anatta, or non-self, which asserts that the self is not an enduring entity, but a series of interconnected processes in constant flux. Yet here lies the key difference. Modern science and Western philosophy often stop at description. They tell us what the brain does, how perception works, and how the self might be illusory. Buddhism, however, does not linger merely in theory. It provides a practical path to liberation from these illusions. While neuroscience might show you that the self is a mental projection, Buddhism asks, what will you do now that you see it? How will you respond to life when the story of I no longer dominates your perception? Consider an everyday example. Your mind may predict a coworker's neutral comment as criticism because of past experiences. Neuroscience explains the mechanism. Buddhism explains the freedom you can find by observing the process without automatically believing it. Both perspectives acknowledge the distortion, but only Buddhism offers a roadmap to step outside it, to stop suffering at its source. By understanding these parallels, we start to see that the brain's predictive model and the Buddha's teachings on conditioned perception are two sides of the same coin. One describes the mechanics, the other guides you toward liberation. And the beauty of this convergence is that it validates what the Buddha observed thousands of years ago, not as superstition or metaphor, but as a real, tangible pattern confirmed by modern science. As we continue in today's exploration, this understanding invites a profound question. If much of what we perceive is a projection of past patterns, mental formations, and predictions, then what happens when we choose to observe without adding our labels, judgments, or ego-driven interpretations? This question leads naturally into the practices of mindfulness and insight meditation, where seeing clearly is not theoretical. It is a lived experiential process. Through this lens, science and Buddhism are not opposed, but complementary. Together, they illuminate the path from illusion to clarity, showing that understanding the mind's construction of reality is the first step toward experiencing life more directly, openly, and freely. Now that we've seen how both science and Buddhism reveal the mind's role in shaping reality, we move into the next part of today's video, the path of mindful awakening, practicing clear seeing. We've explored how our perception is filtered through mental patterns, conditioning, and the self-centered mind. But what can we actually do with this knowledge? How can we step out of the illusions and see the world more clearly? In this next segment, we will journey into the heart of Buddhist practice, where awareness transforms insight into lived experience. The Buddha's teaching to the monk Bahiya captures the essence. In the seen, there is only the seen. In the heard, only the heard. In the sensed, only the sensed. In the cognized, only the cognized. At first glance, this may seem simple, but its depth is immense. It asks us to experience reality without attaching the I to every moment, without coloring sensations, sounds, or thoughts with stories or judgments. In other words, it is a call to pure observation. This principle forms the foundation of mindfulness, sati, and insight meditation, vipassana. Rather than interpreting or labeling life constantly, we train ourselves to see things as they are. Every sight, sound, sensation, and emotion is observed directly, in its impermanent and shifting nature. Thoughts arise and fade, feelings come and go, yet there is no unchanging thinker or feeler behind them, just processes flowing in awareness. Recognizing this is not detachment in a cold sense, it is the opening of our hearts. When the ego's lens is removed, we begin to truly perceive others. Compassion and empathy naturally arise because we see people without the filter of our self-centered projections. Practically speaking, these insights can be brought into daily life with simple, yet profound exercises. First, the mindful pause. Take a single breath and observe what is happening in the present without judgment. Notice the sensations in your body, the sounds around you, the thoughts moving through your mind, without labeling them as good or bad. Second, gentle labeling of emotions. When anger, fear, or frustration arises, quietly name it. Anger, anger, or fear, fear. This practice does not suppress emotion. It creates a gentle distance, allowing you to see that emotions exist without being controlled by them. Third, questioning your certainty. Our minds are prone to automatically assuming we see clearly, but often we project narratives onto reality. Pause and ask, am I seeing this as it truly is, or am I adding my own story? This simple inquiry cracks open the habitual lens of the self and invites clarity. Over time, practicing in this way slowly erodes the illusions created by the ego and mental projections. Life begins to be experienced more directly, with freshness and immediacy. Simple acts like noticing the texture of a leaf, the warmth of sunlight on your skin, or the rise and fall of your breath become gateways to profound insight. Each moment of mindfulness is a thread in unraveling the habitual distortions that keep us trapped in suffering. The true power of this practice is subtle but transformative. It allows us to see the world and ourselves without the constant overlay of story, judgment, or identity. In doing so, we cultivate a kind of freedom that is quiet, profound, and always accessible. The clarity of awareness does not make us cold. It makes us human in the deepest sense, capable of both insight and compassion. So in this final part, we have moved from understanding the mind's patterns to practical ways to experience reality as it is. The path of mindful awakening is not a dramatic leap, but a continuous, gentle practice. Step by step, breath by breath, we learn to observe without attachment, to see without the ego's lens, and to meet life directly. Having explored how mindfulness and insight meditation help us see reality more clearly, we now move into the next part of today's video: the mind's protective lens, evolution, conditioning, and the stories we believe. As we continue this journey, it becomes clear that the mind is not designed to show us the truth in all its naked clarity. Instead, it has evolved to keep us alive, to navigate dangers, to store patterns, and to anticipate threats. And while this has been incredibly useful for survival, it comes at a cost. It filters and distorts our perception of the present moment. The brain prioritizes threats, familiar patterns, and past experiences over the raw data of reality. This means we rarely see the world as it actually is. Instead, we interpret the present through the lens of old memories and conditioning. Every glance, every conversation, and every event is automatically processed through the neural habits we've built over a lifetime. Our reactions often come from psychological conditioning rather than direct observation. One of the most fascinating and sometimes dangerous aspects of the mind is its ability to fill in gaps in information. When something is unclear or ambiguous, the brain doesn't pause. It creates a story. You don't just see or hear. Your mind interprets, predicts, and often fabricates a narrative to make sense of the situation. This is why two people witnessing the same event can emerge with entirely different accounts. The mind isn't lying per se. It is telling a story that is limited, based on past data rather than the present reality. Emotions, especially strong ones, further warp our perception. Anxiety can turn neutral signals into perceived threats. Jealousy can lead us to misread others' intentions. Biases and preconceptions guide our attention only toward what we expect or want to see, leaving out much of the truth lying in plain sight. The mind acts like a protective lens, shielding us from overwhelming reality, but also trapping us in repetitive patterns of misunderstanding. Think about moments in your life when a casual remark felt like criticism, or when someone's neutral behavior triggered a flood of assumptions. These are not failures of your character. They are evidence of the mind's protective mechanisms at work. The brain is constantly seeking safety, comfort, and coherence, even at the expense of seeing clearly. Recognizing this dual nature of the mind is liberating. Once we understand that our perceptions are always filtered through survival mechanisms, conditioning, and past experiences, we begin to question the stories we accept as reality. This awareness opens the door to mindfulness, observing without immediate interpretation, noticing the arising of thoughts and emotions without taking them as absolute truth, and slowly loosening the grip of habitual distortions. Modern neuroscience supports this understanding. Studies in predictive processing show that our brains constantly guess what's out there and fill in missing pieces, sometimes accurately, sometimes not. Buddhist insight meditation, Vipassana, offers a parallel. By observing thoughts, feelings, and sensations without attachment or identification, we see the difference between the mind story and reality itself. Ultimately, the mind is not your enemy. It is a brilliant instrument shaped by evolution to help you survive. But if left unchecked, it can trap you in repetitive cycles of misperception. By recognizing its tendencies and practicing clear seeing, we can navigate life more freely, with awareness, compassion, and a deeper sense of truth. This understanding bridges science and practice. The more we study the brain, the more we confirm the Buddha's ancient insights, that what we perceive is always mediated, conditioned, and shaped by the mind itself. After exploring how the mind's protective lens shapes and distorts our perception, we now move into the next part of today's video: when illusions dissolve, the transformation of perception. As we step into this part of the journey, something remarkable begins to happen. When the illusions of the mind start to dissolve, the world doesn't vanish. It becomes clearer, lighter, and surprisingly more vibrant. Understanding this is at the heart of modern Buddhist insight. Freedom doesn't come from controlling reality, but from seeing it as it truly is, free from the distortions of ego and habitual patterns. When we loosen the grip of automatic identification with thoughts, we notice subtle shifts. Reactions that once erupted unconsciously now pause, creating a space for mindful choice. Anxiety, anger, or jealousy no longer sweep us away entirely. Instead, we find room to respond with clarity and awareness. This is not a cold detachment. It is a deep engagement with life, anchored in understanding rather than reaction. Our relationships transform as well. When we stop viewing others purely through the lens of me and mine, we begin to see the fullness of their presence. The irritations and judgments fade, replaced by an intuitive empathy. A comment that might once trigger defensiveness is now received with curiosity. A minor setback or misunderstanding doesn't spiral into conflict. Connection replaces threat, presence replaces projection. The mind, once so caught in its habitual loops, starts to reveal a subtle wisdom. Truth emerges from direct experience, not from abstract philosophy or intellectual reasoning. We begin to witness the impermanence of sensations, the ebb and flow of thoughts, and the arising and passing of emotions. With this clarity, we recognize that the self we cling to, the constant I in our narratives, is not the controller of experience, but a pattern we have mistaken for reality. The stories of the mind no longer dictate our perception of life. This shift is not a dramatic moment, but a quiet, steady transformation. Each mindful breath, each observation without judgment, polishes the lens through which we see. The mind, once a trap of its own creation, becomes a companion on the path. Freedom is experienced not as control over everything, but as liberation from the mind's own deceptions. Imagine noticing anger arise, labeling it gently as anger, and simply allowing it to pass, or observing fear and realizing that the threat is not in the present moment, but a projection of past patterns. These small acts of awareness accumulate, gradually reshaping perception, softening habitual reactions, and creating a profound sense of ease and clarity. The world appears as it is, transient, interconnected, and alive. The dissolution of illusion is deeply transformative because it shifts us from being reactive to responsive, from bound by narratives to free in the immediacy of experience. We no longer need to wrestle with life or shield ourselves against imagined dangers. Instead, we move through moments with balance, empathy, and presence, aware of both ourselves and others without distortion. Compassion becomes effortless when the me lens softens, because we see the shared humanity beneath every interaction. Ultimately, the transformation of perception reveals that the mind's illusions were never obstacles to life itself. They were invitations to look deeper. Each recognition of a false story or distorted lens is a step toward clarity, presence, and genuine freedom. The practice of seeing without the filter of ego allows us to engage with life directly, with wisdom, courage, and a heart open to what is. And in that clarity, we discover that life, in all its fleeting moments, is already abundant, complete, and profoundly free. As we reach the end of today's journey, one truth emerges. Freedom is not found in faraway places or in the accumulation of more things, more achievements, or more control. It begins here, quietly, in the raw honesty of seeing your mind as it truly is. One mindful breath, one clear observation, can open a doorway to a life unburdened by the stories that have kept you small, afraid, or restless. When illusions fall away, nothing of real value is lost. What disappears are the layers of fear, judgment, and self-deception that once colored every moment. In their place, life unfolds in its pure, immediate, unfiltered form. You see the wind brushing the leaves, the gentle curve of a cup in your hand, or the warmth in another's gaze, not through the filter of ego or expectation, but directly with presence. This is the quiet miracle of clarity. And yet, clarity is not passive. It awakens a responsibility to yourself, to your heart, and to the world around you. When you see clearly, even for a fleeting moment, compassion rises naturally. You notice the hidden struggles of others without judgment, and the urge to respond from kindness rather than fear grows stronger. Every ordinary interaction transforms into a practice of freedom, listening deeply, acting with awareness, choosing response over reaction. So I invite you to take one action today. Pause. Notice a thought or emotion that arises and simply see it. Name it. Observe it without clinging. Share in the comments what you noticed, a small insight, a shift, or even a question. Let's create a space where these moments of awareness ripple outward, connecting us all in curiosity, understanding, and gentle presence. And as you leave this video, carry this seed of clarity with you. Return to it tomorrow, the day after, whenever the mind becomes loud and the stories try to pull you away. Freedom is already here, waiting quietly beneath the noise. In the next videos, we will continue exploring how to walk this path deeper, to see even the subtle illusions that shape our daily life, and to touch the stillness that is always present, always free. Remember, every moment of true seeing is a small liberation. Every breath of presence is a gift. Every step toward mindfulness is a step toward freedom, not somewhere in the future, but here, now, in your own life.